Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I'm here to tell you about an awesome way for you to rub elbows with your favorite podcast hosts here on the Sports History Network, while at the same time rooting for your hometown team this upcoming NFL season. You've been hearing all about our partner, Tailgate Fantasy, the past few weeks. Well, dig on this. Tailgate created a special Sports History Network league for our listeners, so we can put the word fan back into fantasy football together. It's free to join, and if you do so before the season kicks off, you'll automatically be entered into a drawing for a free t-shirt from one of our other partners, Home Field Apparel. It's a win-win-win! So hurry up today and head to sportshistorynetwork.com/tailgate for all the details. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/tailgate.
On the very immediate horizon, there is a movie coming out that football history fans have been waiting for a long time. It's called Triangle Park. It's about the NFL APFA's first football game, and associate producer Scott Ferguson Greene joins us to tell us all about the movie and where you can watch it. Coming up in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time. So as we come out of the tunnel of the Sports History Network, let's take the field and go no huddle through the portal of positive gridiron history with pigskindispatch.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And we really have some great news to announce here in the very near future. We've been talking about it and hearing some rumors here and there and seeing some stuff on social media, but a movie about the NFL's first game, actually the APFA's first game, they became the NFL 2 years later, is going to be coming out. And we have the associate producer, a friend of ours, Scott Ferguson Greene. The movie is called Triangle Park. Scott, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you for having me.
You started telling me about this probably over a year ago that you had, and some of our other friends were on site for some shootings of some clips of this great movie. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how the movie came about or your involvement in it, and tell us a little bit about what the movie's about.
When I had actually traveled to Ohio, I was going to the Professional Football Researchers Association convention in Canton, Ohio. But I have a great-grand aunt who was my great-grandfather's younger sister, and she moved from Virginia to Dayton, Ohio in the 1870s. She ended up having, with her husband, 16 children,
wow,
27 grandchildren, 55 great-grandchildren, and 21 great-great-grandchildren when she passed away at age 97. And I found her life fascinating, that this woman in the Dayton area actually ran a farm until she was 91 years old. So when I was in Dayton, visiting some of my relatives and actually learning a little bit more about my great-grandaunt, Sally, I found out about this movie that was being produced, and it was called Triangle Park. And so while I was in Dayton, I actually visited the actual Triangle Park, and I visited the actual site of the very first NFL football game, then called the American Professional Football Association, at Dayton, Ohio, Triangle Park, that took place on October 3rd, 1920. And I found that fascinating, that was the place where the first game took place. Because Dayton is a small city. Back when my great-grandaunt lived there, it was not populated that much at all. And yet this is when...
I think she created the population of having that many children and grandchildren. Holy cow.
I'm sure. But also, too, when I found out that this movie was actually being produced, that it was at the time just through pre-production and they started production, I wanted to be a part of it, because coming from where I come from, just outside of Philadelphia, I lived in a country town of Phoenixville that basically is right next door to Valley Forge. So history mattered to me, and football is my passion. So you combine the two, I had to be part of this movie. So I was able to petition to see if I could become involved, and I ended up being the associate producer. Now, for the listeners out there, I don't want to mislead anyone. Associate producer doesn't have a whole lot of the heavy lifting that they do, but they do have an impact on the budget. They sometimes have a say on the budget, and it does give you a piece of the project. So, but I wanted to be a part of this because I knew that this was something special. And so the executive producer and director, Alan Farst, he actually created this story that was based on this true game that took place over 7 years ago. And it became a real passion for him. He is a Dayton native, and so he wanted to actually be able to tell this story. And the only interruption, of course, was the pandemic. And so during the pandemic, he had to cease production and put it on hold until it was safe again to be able to resume production. And he did that. He resumed production on October of 2022. They shot, being a docudrama, they would shoot the reenactment scenes of the actual game and all the different things that went about in and around the game, because of the fact that NFL Films neither had photos or they had any film of that first game. So basically, Alan had to do a reenactments to be able to get people to have a sense of what it was like. And they shot that in Dayton, Ohio. They also went on location in Canton, Ohio, mainly in and around Bender's, which that's where the original owners first got together to be able to have regular meetings. And then also, too, they shot some of it in New Jersey, because that was where NFL Films is located. And they got some talent from NFL Films to help out with this particular docudrama. So Alan did a wonderful job to be able to get people to participate in the movie, because he did the reenactments. He was able to get Michelle Tafoya to be able to do the narration for the movie. And some of the stars that he got to interview so that they can comment on the story includes Chris Collingsworth, Eric Dickerson, Joe Buck, John Paxton, the actor, because he was born in Dayton, Ohio, Kirk Herbstreit, Sean McVay, Larry Fitzgerald, Troy Aikman, Joe Theismann, Susie Colbert, Ben Roethlisberger, Terry McCauley, who is an NFL referee, Tony Dungy, and Los Angeles Rams wide receiver Cooper Kupp. These are some of the people that actually are able to help tell the story in commentary. And so I think people will really be interested in the telling of the story, because it's not only a story of the very first game that took place in between the Dayton Triangles and the Columbus Panhandles, but it also tells the story of the birth of what we know now, this phenomenon called the National Football League, and how the owners really and truly had to find a way to be able to make this work. Because remember, back then, college football was king, and baseball was the most popular sport in America. Now, this was coming right off of the Black Sox scandal. And so that you had fans staying away from ballparks because they couldn't trust whether the game was on the up and up. You had those skeptics. And so pro football was not looked upon at that particular time in 1920 as something that was respectable, but you have to give credit to the owners to try to get this business off the ground. From where I come from in the little town of Phoenixville, we had the Union Club of Phoenixville, Big Red independent pro football team, but all those towns that had independent pro football teams would just schedule games whenever they could. You had players that basically, because pro football was not respectable, sometimes would use the aliases so that they would hide the fact that they were playing pro football. And so the NFL owners wanted a little bit more organization where you had games that could be scheduled that would count in standings and be able to declare a champion. And the monumental task of being able to try to start a business that was not looked upon as respectable, that was not looked upon as even having the remote possibility of being a success, you have to give credit to those original owners.
Yeah, absolutely. And, something I want to make sure that people understand, because, well, this is my understanding. You correct me if I'm wrong. I know from a lot of our friends that are in the Professional Football Research Association, I think the gentleman that was running this, or somebody, invited a lot of them, including yourself, to be on site during these shootings for accuracy and historic accuracy purposes. Is that true?
Yes, because whenever you do a timepiece in any, whether it be a docudrama or a narrative, you don't want the audience to point out mistakes because that can be a distraction. So basically, the executive producer, director, Alan, had to really come up where there was accuracy as far as the style of clothes, the environment. He even got cars that were part of the docudrama when he did the reenactments that were 1920 cars and before, so that they'd be accurate. Because there are folks that can actually pick out, the models of cars, or can pick out that, oh, that was not the style back then. And you don't want people to actually be able to point to mistakes because that distracts from the story.
Yeah, you don't want Joe Carr drinking out of a Starbucks glass or something.
Correct. Correct. And so they did a fabulous job. Alan and his team did a fabulous job to try to be as accurate as they possibly can on this docudrama when they did the reenactments, because it really helps lend to be able to tell an accurate story based on true events.
Yeah, that is definitely something for folks like you and I and the listeners. We want that historic accuracy, and we want to be able to feel like we were at the event. And of course, we don't have time machines or anything like that, so we can't go back and watch that original game. There's no footage, like you said, or photographs, but this is the next best thing when you have somebody that's passionate about the project, a group of people passionate about the project, and they're doing it right, and they're trying to make everything historically accurate and make people feel like they are at that actual event. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And, when you think about it, you've got to be able to, when you do a project like this, you've got to be able to make sure that it has the right look. So they shot the docudrama on a red Komodo camera, which they shot it in 6K. And for those that don't quite understand the acronyms, a 6K is basically 6,000 of resolution lines, because K meaning 1,000. So you have to be able to have the type of look that's going to reflect the 1920s. And all that is involved in being able to do that. And so they were able to get the type of looks. You have to be very aware of a color palette when you shoot a film, if it reflects the time period. You have to be very aware of the tone. You've got to be aware of the production design, the set design. All of that matters. And Alan and his team did a wonderful job being able to recreate. And when you see the documentary, hopefully you'll be transported back to 1920.
Yeah.
That'll give you that type of feel. So
Well, that is something definitely to look forward to. So, you were saying something. There's going to be some release dates coming up, and are you able to share some of those with us, and maybe where folks can be able to see this movie at?
yes. So the first premiere of Triangle Park will take place on October 26th. Then there'll be other dates in November in different parts of Ohio, because there'll be showings in Cleveland, Columbus, and Dayton itself. The Columbus showing is already sold out. You can go to the website of Triangle Park movie.com to be able to get tickets, but they're going to have other showings in Columbus because the tickets sold so fast in Columbus, and they're selling really fast in Cleveland and Dayton and in Miamisburg, Ohio. So people are already excited about seeing this on the big screen.
Now, will it be spreading beyond the borders of Ohio at some point?
Yes, because the actual general release date will be November 14th. And there will be theatrical showings in all 32 NFL cities, plus 18 more cities besides that. So you will be able to see it on the big screen in a NFL city near you or other cities. So there'll be 50 cities in all in which they'll be able to see this picture. Also, too, it's going to be available on Amazon Prime and Apple TV on Thanksgiving Day 2023. So
Nice.
You'll be able to access it on streaming platforms, and those two streaming platforms for sure.
Wow. Okay, that is quite an event. Then this is a lot of things happening very quickly with this film, and very appropriate timing on that. During the football season, and as we pay honor to those that sort of started this game so bravely, like you mentioned earlier, and that's a really cool project that you're involved with, and we're certainly glad that you folks were able to produce something like this, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we have some really good talent that's involved. The person that did the main theme song for Triangle Park is Chuck Lavelle, who was the keyboardist and arranger for the Rolling Stones. He also helped compose the score. So we're really excited about that we have such talent to be able to have that done. We're grateful for the companies that were involved, because making a movie of any sort, whether it be a docudrama or a narrative, does cost money. But Alan was able to get Century 21 involved, Gem Vehicle involved, the Pro Football Hall of Fame got involved, the Vince Lombardi Collection and Library was involved, the film Dayton itself was involved. And so he was able to get companies involved to be able to have a lot of support behind this wonderful documentary that I think people will really enjoy.
Yeah, wow, that is definitely pretty cool. So Dayton, Ohio, the first football game, professional football game of the NFL APFA is played there. Besides being the home of the Wright brothers and the Wright Brothers Museum, which is another cool thing that's in that city. So very interesting.
Absolutely. The game itself that took place on October 3rd, 1920, it made such news that the Dayton Daily News, in the front page of the sports section, had 6 of the Dayton Triangles players' pictures right in front. And where it was prominently placed was just above the article on the World Series at that time, because the Cleveland Indians and the Brooklyn Dodgers were playing in the 1920 World Series. And yet this took precedent on that sports page in Dayton, on the Dayton Daily News.
Wow. So maybe they were almost sort of thumbing their nose at the scandal that happened a few years earlier.
Right.
A year earlier, I guess, right? That would have been 1919 World Series was the Black Sox, right?
Right. Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So it was a year in advance. Wow.
And part of this story also, if people who really understand about that time, whether it be baseball, boxing, football, there was a lot of gambling that went on. There were a lot of scandals that happened in and around sports. And I know that, for example, I read that the Columbus Panhandles, they were basically a road football team because Joe Carr, who was the future NFL commissioner, he wanted to save expenses. And most of the Columbus Panhandles players worked on the railroads. So they would ride the railroads for free. And that way Joe Carr could save on expenses. And they basically were a road team. They played one game home in Columbus, but that was one of the reasons why they traveled to Dayton for that very first football game. And there was a lot of rumors at that particular time because the day before the Ohio State Buckeyes had played, they beat Westland 55-0. And so there were rumors that some Ohio State players from that game were being signed on to play for the Columbus Panhandles that first Sunday of the NFL, where there was a league game. And we knew that there were postgraduate Ohio State players that played for the Columbus Panhandles, but there was also rumors that were undergraduates that were playing. Now, we don't know whether Joe Carr was aware of this or not, because there's nothing that indicates whether he was or was not. But I know that when Joe Carr became president, he was vehemently opposed to having undergraduate football players being played in the NFL. So that's kind of an interesting twist that basically the suspicion was there that there were some undergraduates that played in this game, although we don't know if Joe Carr was aware of it or not.
Yeah, that's definitely cool. And it's something I just came across, doing some research from one of my projects, as I was looking in Greg Fisseri's book on Gridiron Legacy, and he's got he talks a lot about the Canton Bulldogs and Massillon Tigers of 1905, 1906 era. And on that roster, and I believe it's on the Massillon roster for 1905 or 1906, is a couple of the Nessers that ended up starring Ted Nesser, and I forget one of the other Nessers was on there too, that were on the Panhandles. That's 14 years later that they're still playing pro ball, and they probably weren't spring chicks when they played in 1906 either, I'm sure.
Exactly. I know that the Dayton Herald, from the day after the game was played, it was such a big deal that it was part of the sublines that it was the largest crowd that Dayton had ever seen. There's different reports whether 4,000 or 5,000 people actually showed up for that first game. Most accounts say 5,000. Each fan paid $1.75 per ticket to watch that football game. I recently paid $300 for a ticket, and I'm in the nosebleed seats for an NFL game.
Gee, and you had to pass popcorn down and cold drinks down to somebody too, didn't you?
Exactly. Each player got $50 for that game, which was pretty good back in 1920. And the first player to actually score a touchdown for the Dayton Triangles was Lou Partlow. And Lou Partlow was interesting because he was a tough guy. And they didn't have tackling dummies back then. So what did Lou do? He would go into the forest and would ram his body against trees. That's how he toughened himself up. That's what he would do. He would ram his body against trees over and over again. And he was a tough runner. He really was, for the Dayton Triangles, and they absolutely loved him. Francis Bacon scored the second touchdown during that game. And again, the Dayton Triangles they had fans who just fell in love with them because of that very first football game. And Dayton at the time was owned by Carl Stork, who was also a future NFL president. And so I'm hoping that Triangle Park will be able to tell this story, because there's a lot of different aspects to this that people will really like. And I don't think anybody will be disappointed once they see it.
Well, I don't think we are going to be either, because anything connected with football, we know is going to be a great thing when it's based on actual football history and telling an actual story, and done as thoughtfully as this one has been done, with so much talent in it. And, all the way around, the actors and the film producers, yourself and historians and everybody else involved, and the guests that are going to be commentating, which are players and coaches in the NFL currently, or at least in the modern era. That is just some really cool things, and some great organizations teaming up with you folks to do that. So, Scott, we really appreciate you coming on here and sharing this, and we all look forward to watching Triangle Park here in the next few months.
Thank you, Darren. I hope you all enjoy.
Peeking up at the clock, the time's running down. We're going to go into victory formation, take a knee, and let this baby run out. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back tomorrow for the next podcast. We invite you to check out our website, PigskinDispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. PigskinDispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Jean Monroe, as well as Jason Neff, for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Each week, the official Football Learning Academy podcast will take you deep into the history of pro football through interviews with players, coaches, or administrators in the NFL, as well as interviews with Pro Football Hall of Fame selectors, authors, and historians. You'll learn how the game evolved and important moments that shaped the sport into what it is today. And don't miss the Pro Football History Nugget of the Week. Listen to the official Football Learning Academy podcast on the Sports History Network.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.